Testing 1 2, testing 1 2 3. Hello. This is a first, and this is certainly strange for me. Yes. So today we are doing an impromptu art lecture. I can't believe I'm doing this. Like life is very strange. All right. So here's the thing. We are explaining shape hierarchy. There are three things to keep in mind when. Huh, There are three things to keep in mind when you are looking at a character design. And those three things are shape, color, and value. Not necessarily in those order. In the order that you want to typically perceive things in, it is shape, then value, then color. Um, well, value and color are kind of interchangeable. It's weird and it depends, right? So, for an assignment, I asked 2Cs here, our student, our protege here, to pick their favorite characters and attempt to break down their shape hierarchy. Then I realized something. I kind of sort of fudged my explanation on shape hierarchy. So today we're going to be going over this in like relative detail. So, one thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with shape hierarchy and character design is that character designs always have an objective. And usually that character design's objective is to direct your eye to a certain point on the character. But like, there are other objectives, sub-objectives rather. So, for example, you want your character to be readable. You want to be able to understand their posing, all that good stuff. You want your character to be instantly recognizable. So, like, keep these in mind, like in the back of our heads. And one way we do that is, or one way we figure out where we want the viewer's eye to go, is by placing detail, etc., in places where it supports the visual hierarchy of the character. Let's go with a couple of quick examples, right? So, I typically refer to the areas as zones, where we're supposed to be looking at characters. And oh my gosh, that is a huge. Let me see. Alright, so typically with zone 0, this is where we want the character to, this is where we want the eye to look. Right? Or we want like primary focus. This is, if there was a portrait or something like that, this is where you'd usually see. This is what you'd usually see. Let me see. And everything else, right? So there's zone 0, and let's see. We have zone 1, where it's where things get a little bit more simple usually, but not too much more simple. Zone 1 is also where, on certain character designs, you will see a lot of details. And then you have Zone 2. Where is this? Zone 2. So, high detail. Usually it's high detail, medium detail, low detail. That's how you see it in a lot of game characters, and a lot of character designs in general. Now, the funny thing is, the way that a lot of people view character design these days, it's kind of backwards, because they think that a character design isn't impressive unless it's like crazy detailed or something like that. And that, I can't even begin to tell you what's wrong with that. Well, I can, and I probably will at some point in today's broadcast. But the pinnacle of character design is readability. It's making sure that your character can be easily understood at a glance. And a lot of that is done, strangely enough, through simple tricks or through like mastery of the simple elements of character design that slowly build up to more complex elements. And that is part of why having a shape hierarchy in place is important. So we're going to go through here and we are going to mark down the zone 0s, zone 1s, and zone 2s of each of these characters. So like with Ryu here, right? Ryu zone 0 is up here, right? Zone 1. Zone 1 is here. Zone 2 is right here, right? Same with Dhalsim, right? Dhalsim, zone 0. Let's see. Green. Zone 1. And like I'm doing these quickly for the sake of example. In zone 2, right? Eddie Gordo. Zone 0. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. So you'll kind of notice that I'm presenting these as kind of like a fan, where the more specific, you have more specific elements up here, you have less specific elements down here, right? Afro Samurai, same deal. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. Sub-Zero. Same deal. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. And you're kind of getting the meat of it. But like, let's go through these examples anyway, because one of these actually has an interesting example where there's only like 2 zones, and I think you can kind of spot it right away. Hey, how's it going, Dash? So, next up we have King, Zone 0. Zone 1 and Zone 2. So, like, here's the funny thing, right? The funny thing is in this case, you kind of have an inversion of what's happening with Zone 1 and Zone 0. Or not Zone 1 and Zone 0. Zone 1 and Zone 2. But, like, let's continue. Lara Croft. Zone 0. Well, actually, whoops. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. Chun-Li. Zone 0. On her, it's a little smaller because of the shoulder pads, but little. Zone 1. Zone 2. Kazuya, or is this Jin? I can never tell the two of them apart. Let's see. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. I believe this is Pan Am from Cyberpunk, if I'm not mistaken. Same deal. Zone 0, and because we only see so much of this character, we're going to cut it off at Zone 1. I do not recognize this character at all, but the same rules apply. Zone 0, Zone 1, well actually Zone 1 would be a little further down. And Zone 2 would be further down. Human Smoke, same deal. Zone 0, Zone 1, Zone 2, Kitana, same deal. Zone 0, Zone 1, Zone 2, Donkey Kong, Zone 0, Zone 1. And this is kind of interesting because technically Zone 1 and Zone 2 merge, but it's mostly just Zone 1 because of how simple his character design is. And there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, there is a whole lot right with that. And I'll explain that shortly. Fox McCloud. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. This character was from Jak 2 or 3. I don't remember his name. Same deal. Zone 0. Zone 1. And Zone 2. And then we have Cyrax. Zone 0. Zone 1. Zone 2. Alright, so looking at this in aggregate, we kind of see a pattern here developing, right? So let's go on to the meat of our discussion here, which is going to be like our shape hierarchies. Typically we view things as primary shapes, secondary shapes, and tertiary shapes, right? Sometimes character designs only go like 1 or 2 levels deep down that hierarchy. So with Jak, so let's explain primary shapes, right? Let's go here, make sure this is right. Alright, so our primary shape is basically, if we take Jak's head here, the primary shape is basically like the shape envelope of what's going on here. Right? Right. With our secondary shapes, in this case, being a further breakdown. So if we just look at it in terms, we strip it of detail, like pretend kind of like we're somewhat visually impaired. Our secondary shape would be like cutting off the hair, and then we have this no man's land, and then there's also the skin area. So like right away we have a couple of shapes here and the skin area. So we've gotten our secondary shapes. Our tertiary shapes are basically anything below. Let me just show you, and I think you'll pick it up. All right. Our tertiary shapes would be things like these. So also these goggles, the general outline of them would be considered a secondary shape. So we have like 3 secondary shapes here. Our tertiary shapes would be basically these circles on the goggles. Now, this goes back to what I said at the very beginning of the cast, where there are 3 primary tools we use in character design, or 3 primary building blocks: shape, color, and shape, color, and value, right? And like, for example, he has a face here, not terribly important as far as shape hierarchy goes. As a matter of fact, the face has its own shape hierarchy, believe it or not. But we're not considering that in the context of this lecture or in the context of this entire design, except for one particular exception to that rule, and it's kind of important. But we see, so let's go ahead and make a new layer, and we'll just go over all of the primary shapes. Or we'll go over the primary shape. As a general rule, the primary shapes are the shape envelopes of what you see. So, like, we're taking this particular red, and we're just going over. We're just quickly going over. Sure. I thought I had it down to a reasonable level, but let's turn it down some more, shall we? Is that good? Alright, let's continue. Alright, so we've got our shape envelope here, right? Let's just eliminate this line right here. And for Ryu here, we have our primary shape, which basically. Now here's the funny thing, right? We have a shape envelope that goes around the entire character. But the primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes, or primary shapes, can also be certain elements within a character's design. And in a studio, you will sometimes hear that being used. But for our purposes right now, we are just concerned with the overall shape of the character when we refer to primary shapes. So just keep that in mind. Some things can be used interchangeably and all that good stuff. Doll scene here. Alright, so alright. So one thing you'll notice is that I left out that bracelet. There's a good reason for that. And that is because the bracelet is a detail. We want to keep things as big picture as we possibly can, so we are only concerning ourselves with the shape envelopes for now. Same with Eddie Gordo. Afro Samurai. And in a second, I'm gonna do something that's gonna kind of blow your mind here. Well, not not really blow your mind, but like it's we're gonna have an aha moment. As soon as I'm done with this particular stage of identifying the primary shapes. Now here's the funny thing, right? Once you master the method, or once you master understanding this, you can kind of look at characters and know immediately what methods were used to design them. So it is quite handy. Alright. All right. So here's the funny thing, right? For Dalsim and Afro Samurai, we didn't add their bracelets to the primary shape envelope. But for Chun-Li, her bracelets are considered a part of her primary shape. Why is that? Uh, it's all a matter of like how much of an impact they have on the character's silhouette initially. Like if I were to like zoom in and like squint my eyes, I wouldn't really see the bracelets on Afro Samurai and Dalsim. But if I zoom out and squint my eyes, I can make out the bracelets on Chun-Li's hands or on Chun-Li's arms. So like it's kind of funny. Art is a visual medium, but in order to do it effectively, or in order to make sure that you're communicating effectively, you kind of need to rob yourself of sight. Exactly, primary shapes. You kind of have to rob yourself of sight in some way in order to like get a full picture of what you're doing right and wrong. Wait, let's just keep it to the character design proper. We'll exclude gear. We kind of try to be agnostic to when doing this. I'm kind of trying to be agnostic to like all of the little intricacies of the negative space. But let's just continue. Okay, so actually. Right. Oops. Made a little goof here, but it's okay, because I remembered we are excluding gear. Even though in this case it is part of the character's silhouette, or part of the silhouette. You know what? Screw it. We're adding this. Don't care. We're adding it because it's important for this lesson. Huh. Actually, this rendition of Fox McCloud has something very interesting happening. But like, we'll point that out when we get to it. All right. And then lastly, we have our good buddy Cyrax. Considering that he is in MK Cyber Ninja, we can't really consider his dreads to be part of his primary. It's weird because like his dreads are his most distinguishable feature. That's how you tell Cyrax from Sector, from like Cyborg, Smoke, etc. But like in terms of their overall design, or like it just doesn't add enough to the silhouette to like warrant it being part of the character's primary shape. And that's okay. Okay. We're closing in on the mind blow. Alright, and now here's where the mind blow comes in. You can identify these characters simply by their silhouette or their primary shape, or their primary shapes here. Like for example, you can tell right away this is Jack. You can tell right away this is Ryu. You can almost tell right away that this is Dawson, Eddie Gordo, Afro Samurai, Sub-Zero. This is King, Lara Croft, Chun-Li, Jin from Tekken. This character, it could be a number of things, but within the context of Cyberpunk, you will know immediately that this is Pan Am. This character here could be a number of characters now that I really look at it, so this particular design may not be that effective. Within the context of its own world, or whatever world this character comes from, could be highly identifiable. But in this lineup, not so much. You can tell that this is Smoke, right? You can tell that this is a female figure. that there's something going on there. Can't exactly tell it's Katana without the fans though. And yeah, that probably goes a long way towards explaining why they cut out Movada. But like again, this shows what's the word I'm looking for? This kind of shows some of the hurdles that they were dealing with MK9 or with the design of Katana and other characters in MK9. You can tell right away this is Donkey Kong. You can tell right away this is Fox McCloud. You can tell right away that this is a character from the Jak and Daxter series. And again, this looks like a Mortal Kombat character. It looks like it could be one of the cyborgs. Right? So like, that's the second mind blow. Now, let's go in and attempt to discern these things even further, right? So like, this all that we've done so far, primary shapes. Primary shape. Let's go down to secondary. And to do that, let's use Alright, now here's the funny thing, right? Funny thing is, well, let's just continue. Alright, so on Jak, his secondary shapes, let's thin this pencil a bit more. His secondary shapes, we're looking purely at shape, color, and value in order to determine these things. Well, we'll just get the borders of these things because we still want primary shapes to be visible. So let me see. And always keep in mind that can also encompass it can also encompass negative space as well. So here's the funny thing, right? You see how I'm delineating this belt as, well, actually no, that would be a tertiary shape. Delineating this belt as being part of the secondary shape hierarchy, but like this color, this change in color and or value here, I am not. There's a reason for that, and the reason for that is that this down here is actually a tertiary shape. These white segments above and below the belt, tertiary shapes. So when in doubt, it's kind of the question of somewhat visually impairing yourself when you do this. So for example here, like this, the wraps on his right arm, we wouldn't really notice that if we squint at it. So we can't really consider that to be, but if we were to go in terms of pure color, it would be noticeable. So it's one of those things where, you know how the Predator has like different types of vision on his visor? We have to, when we look at a character design, we have to be kind of the same way when we analyze a character design. So it's like, okay, the first thing we look for is shape. Okay, if we aren't noticing anything different with shape, let's take a look at color. Alright, we're not noticing anything different with color. Let's take a look at value. Okay, now we see something different going on. And good character designs will make use of shape, color, and value in order to spread out the information that we're taking in. Or in order to, like, package the information. Not spread it out, but package the information that we're taking in. Okay, so for Ryu, right? Alright, so we have a secondary shape there. We've got a secondary shape in the form of this gi. You see the secondary shape in the form of his gloves. Also, his arms are considered a secondary shape, or rather, his skin is considered a secondary shape. Alright, his belt is considered a secondary shape. Now, here's what'll get you, right? Or here's what can get you if you're not careful. And it also depends on who you talk to, because everything below the belt could be considered, in terms of color, it's considered its own secondary shape. In terms of value, it would be considered its own secondary shape. The only thing that gives us, and in terms of shape, it's considered its own secondary. It would be considered its own secondary shape, right? The only thing that gives us any impression that anything different is going on here is the rendering. As strange as that sounds, right? And we typically don't consider rendering, but in this case, Pix EXE, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome to the pack. So when you run into something like that, what you want to do is, because there is definitely something going on here, right? So, like, this is one of those strange instances where there was a rule and there was a rule to break, right? So, like, this portion of his gi, we obviously know that there is a clear delineation between his gi and his pants, right? If we look at it in terms of shape, color, and so it's, well, this is one of those instances where it's definitely a matter of shape. And then, like, for there, we have that. Let's go to our friend Dalsim here. And again, we are taking our time to delineate the what's the word I'm looking for? To delineate the secondary shapes. So we'll just take a guess, or the borders around secondary shapes. Alright, this sash here, that would be a tertiary shape. This knot, however, would be a secondary shape. So let's just capture that. Because if we zoom out and squint, that knot is still visible. Eddie Gordo. So it's a matter of picking out what is it's a matter of picking out, like, the elements of substance. And, like, here's the funny thing, right? The funny thing is because of the way that Eddie Gordo's designed, these green and yellow areas are also secondary shapes. Because remember, shape, color, value. So what that also means is that we can take these areas here, Afro Samurai. We'll pick out the borders of, Afro Samurai. We'll pick out the borders of the secondary shapes. Okay, and now here's something interesting, right? We're seeing shape and value used to effect here. And part of the reason for that is because of the zone at which it is that particular detail is located. Where the hell is it? There it is. All right. So this is a zone. This is zone 2. So we're seeing shape and value used to kind of blend this together so that we pay more attention to everything above zone 2. With Sub-Zero. Okay, we are still on the proper layer. Right. Alright, so with Sub-Zero, we have a secondary shape here. We have a secondary shape there. So that denotes his mask. We have a secondary shape here. Actually, we see. Let's zoom out for a second. Yeah, okay, got it. Got a secondary shape. We have this and this. And that terminates there. I never thought I'd be teaching this stuff in a million years. Alright, now, here's the funny thing, right? With Sub-Zero, we have a number of... again, it's the same thing as Ryu, right? Let's go ahead and mark off this belt. But, again, it's the same thing as Ryu, where you have things that, if you look at it through a lens of value, it's pretty similar. If you look at it through a lens of shape, it's kind of similar. But if you look at it through a lens of color, then we get something. Then we get to where the interest lies. So, like, just kind of imagine yourself when you look at character designs. And again, these are on the hierarchy. These are pretty much all the same because these are all secondary shapes. But like, kind of imagine that you're looking through a predator visor at every character design you see, and I swear you won't be able to unsee it after a while. Okay. Let me see. Let's take. Yeah, the wraps would be tertiary because they aren't readily visible. When you look at them. Now here's the funny thing, right? The funny thing is considering we'll get to that in a bit, and there's a reason that I'm going to get into that a bit, because there is a level below tertiary, and that's typically like reserved for patterns detail, noise, etc. Now with not with Armor King, with regular King, right? There's a very interesting little inversion that's going on here. It's not that they're not visible, it's that they're not immediately, like you could so for example, let's go ahead and you can understand what you're looking at without those details on each of these examples. You know exactly who you're looking at without them. Hence the term tertiary, because like as far as they're like, so for example, let's go with, so like when you think of like primary objectives, those are the things that you absolutely positively must have. Secondary objectives, things that are really important, but you might be able to live without them, but chances are like if you miss those, something's definitely missing. Tertiary objectives. These are things that you can miss. You can miss. They aren't going to affect like they aren't the end of the world. They definitely aren't the end of the world if you don't get them. That's how I like to think of. That's how I like to think of those things. All right, so now here's the funny thing with King, and it's actually kind of brilliant. It's kind of brilliant because this is kind of an inversion of like classic shape hierarchy. And the reason I say that is because what King does in order to draw you up to this area, I mean, sure, it's a leopard head, right? But even without the context of it being a leopard head, you have this huge area of rest for the eyes, where it would just be the skin tone, and then right up here you have like the shapes that comprise the leopard head. Right, and then like even for separate elements like the boots here, you can kind of see where there is the primary shape of the boot, the secondary shapes of the boot, the tertiary shapes of the boot. So like you can nest that visual hierarchy into elements on the form of the character. And that's also something important to keep in mind. It's part of the reason why I hesitated a bit before going into explanation on the boots of Sub-Zero, or on the footwear. And like you'll see that in video game characters a lot. So a lot of your highly detailed video game characters like Marcus Phoenix, Gears of War, etc. You'll notice that overall the character has a very solid shape hierarchy, where you'll notice your primary shapes, secondary shapes, your tertiary shapes, but even elements within the character, when properly placed, have that same hierarchy themselves. So it's nested. Let's go with our girl Lara, because Lara is kind of interesting. Because you know what? Well, actually, technically, that would be a tertiary shape. Well, this is Tomb Raider. This is obviously Tomb Raider 1 Lara, but we're gonna treat this kind of like Tomb Raider 2 Lara, just for the hell of it. And in Tomb Raider 2, Lara had like a lower cut. It wasn't like a onesie. It wasn't a single piece bathing suit underneath shorts. It was actually, well, it still was kind of, but it was more of a tank top in Tomb Raider 2. Let me see, with Chun-Li, right? We've got her signature hair buns. Let's see, we've got her hair itself. Okay, we've got the main portion of her bracelets. Again, we mentioned that earlier, where it's sometimes it's easier to spot things when you, or spot the nature of things when you impair your vision somewhat. Okay, so with Jin, got his hair, and again, like it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same principle with Armor King, where they kind of invert the hierarchy. Because right away we can see that Jin has this huge area of rest, and that helps to draw your eye up here because of this point where his hair kind of comes up and makes that point. So, like, you know, keep in mind one thing. One of my professors, when I was now here's the funny thing, right? In terms of value, we wouldn't notice this belt, right? In terms of color, we wouldn't notice this belt. The only reason we're noticing this belt is because of shape. So again, Predator visors, right? This belt is actually a secondary shape. Pan Am got her hair. Alright, we've got this area of rest down here, which also helps to bring emphasis to the face. This is actually a very well-designed character. Now here's the funny thing, right? Part of the reason I'm saying that is because within the context of, let's see, does that have the same weight? Yeah, it does have the same weight. So yeah, this would also be considered a secondary shape. Let's see. These belts. Let's see. These belts would be considered tertiary shapes, but the shape formed by this here would be considered secondary, believe it or not. Secondary made of tertiary. So let's see. You have that. Alright, Movado, I believe his name was. Alright, so, right away. Now, Movado has an awful lot going on here. I'm guessing this guy is from the PS2 era of Mortal Kombat. Alright. Alright, we're trying to catch the borders of these shapes here. So you can kind of tell because a lot of it has kind of the same rendering style as you know what? This is one of those cases where and then that would be a detail. All right. Let me see. We have Human Smoke. This is the MK9 version. All right. So we have hair. We have mask. We have skin. All right. Now, let me see. And kind of similar to Sub-Zero over there. Maybe mistaken, but I don't think I am. Alright. Oh, a place of rest? Yeah. I would say that the area of rest on Human Smoke would probably be here. Right here. Like this broad area right underneath his mask would be this broad dark area would be the area of rest. Like, in areas of rest are places that don't really have much going on in a character's design. Let me see. Kitana. We've got her hair. We've got her top. And we've got her, we've basically got her shoes. Oh, and we also have her glove, armband, brace things. So, like, right away we're noticing, so if we take away this, we can notice that we can understand this character a bit better now. Oh wait, forgot to get the hair coming from behind. We can understand this character. We can understand this character or what's going on a little bit better. But you also kind of notice. I'm kind of debating with myself whether I should go into this. But you know what? It's information that can't really hurt. You're also starting to notice like the general over shapes of the character. So, like for example, with Katana, you're noticing we have a diamond here. We have the makings of a diamond here. We also kind of create pointed shapes on her thighs. Now, this one here, this is where things are gonna get kind of crazy, because our dear friend Donkey Kong, right? Donkey Kong is pretty much all secondary shapes. It's actually kind of nuts. Like, if we look just in sheer terms of color, boom, boom. Like this tie here, it's kind of deceptive, but this tie, like in its entirety, whoops, that there, is a secondary shape. And again, we're like discounting facial details, but like Donkey Kong pretty much just stops at secondary shapes. Like if we remove this, you can tell immediately that this is Donkey Kong. Well, you could tell it even without this layer. You can tell that was Donkey Kong immediately, but he stops. He just hard stops at secondary shapes. It's kind of nuts. Fox McCloud here, right? Alright, now this is interesting. Because Fox McCloud's details, or at least some of his facial details, are important to understanding, the design. But Fox McCloud, like, he basically proves the rule, by himself. So if we like, and we're just going by the borders of the shapes. Let's see. Let's zoom out. Does the belt count as primary or secondary? The belt kind of does count as secondary. And then we've got the tail, where it's a difference of color. Color and a minor difference of value. So again, if we remove this, we can like identify Fox immediately. Like we identify Fox immediately with we kind of identify Fox immediately there without the secondary shapes. But if you include the secondary shapes right away, you know it's Fox McCloud. This fellow here. Now here's the funny thing, right? You can tell how they went about designing this character. You can tell they designed this character silhouette first. And the reason that you can tell they designed this character silhouette first, look at his look at his shoulders, look at his shins. Right? You can tell this guy was designed silhouette first. And it's actually a brilliant design. Quite beautiful. Alright, so secondary shapes with this guy. Alright, so we've got his hair, we've got the skin, we've got this scarf here. Right? But there's a break in the scarf, so there's a secondary triangle here, comprised of tertiary shapes. You'll see that happen in character designs quite a bit. You can tell it was designed silhouette first, because let's go back here. Typically, you can tell because of things like the shoulders sticking out, and alright. Wait, there's a better way of explaining this. Give me a moment, because I'm thinking of a way to explain this that's not like cyclical. Because this is a part of my experience that is very difficult for me to explain, right? The asymmetrical elements that we're seeing on this character are actually within the realm of the secondary and tertiary shapes, right? But in terms of primary shape, this character is actually pretty symmetrical. And we know this because we're taking a look at the negative space of this character. And that's part of why I know that this character was designed with the silhouette first, because of just how clean the negative shapes are when we look at this character. So, for example, like this here, yeah. Now you're beginning to see now you can see what I see. Said the shepherd boy to the mighty king. Yeah. And like you would especially see this, you would see a lot of this in the PS2 era, or in the PS1 era too. But like it became super important in the PS2 era. So I hope that helps to answer that particular query. As a matter of fact, we're gonna and for the belt, we're going to consider the belt in aggregate a secondary shape. We're also going to consider that a secondary shape. Alright. Wait. Let's capture this. There we go. And then we have our boy Cyrax. Now, believe it or not, our cyborg ninja here actually does have a little bit of nesting. Actually, this has the same. This is on the same hierarchical level. Actually, no. No, I made a mistake here. That is not on the same hierarchical level. I almost fell into a trap. I almost fell into a trap. So yeah, even if you've been doing this for a long time, it is it's very not difficult, but it's very easy to fall into some traps. It is very easy. All right. Ah, great. Let's see. Because it stands out so much, we can consider that portion of the mask a secondary shape. Alright, so, again with the test, we're kind of getting more of a picture here, right? We're starting to see we're starting to see where everything is going. We're starting to get a picture of where our secondary shapes are and how those are interacting. All of that good stuff. Like, a number of these characters are like instantly recognizable as a result. And now we're going to have some fun with our tertiary shapes. Let's get something that stands out a little bit more for tertiary. Yellow. Alright. So for our tertiary shapes, let's see, this here. And again, here's the funny thing, right? Tertiary shapes can be negative space. So we've got tertiary shapes there and there, and here. And this negative space here, well, actually we marked that as secondary. Ugh. Ryu, here's the funny thing, right? Ryu only has a pair of single tertiary shapes on his person, and that's the white portion of his gloves. Dalsim. Tertiary shape would be that there, and that would be his bracelets. Like going a little further into like his face design, Like these markings here would be his tertiary, would be technically tertiary shapes. It could also be patterning. So like that's kind of, it depends on who you talk to. We didn't mark Gordo's hairline here, and that's actually kind of important. Now here's the funny thing: you could tell who he was without it. Eddie Gordo doesn't have much in the way of tertiary detail. Like this here would be a pattern. This rope here technically could be considered to be making tertiary shapes. Again, that depends on who you talk to. This pattern up here. That's another thing. Eddie Gordo pretty much stops at secondary shapes. Afro Samurai. You see the pleats on his hakama could be considered tertiary shapes. I did a poor job on Afro Samurai. Actually, I did a poor job on our boy Afro Samurai here. And I was on the wrong layer when I did it. But we can do better. Actually, Afro Samurai seems to stop at the second level too. Like the only tertiary shapes really on this character are his bracelets. Sub-Zero, for instance, his tertiary shape could also be argued to or the Lin Kuei. Now here's the funny thing, right? You've got the shapes being made by these wraps here, but underneath that, this would be pretty much considered a pattern on his footwear, and we covered that previously. Let's continue. Armor King. Now this is one of those instances where you would be seeing, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you would be seeing like a nested hierarchy. So here. Border here, like this section here would be considered part of the nested hierarchy. This section of the boots would be considered a nested hierarchy. You see that a lot in game character design, especially after the PS2 era, or around and after the PS2 era. With Lara Croft, it's kind of weird because she doesn't have much in the way of tertiary shapes. Like there, like the socks. Well, technically the belt. Technically the belt could be considered a secondary shape, but like for the purposes of keeping things moving, Chun-Li, like her tertiary shapes would be the bracelet, spikes, and technically these would be a pattern, but we'll just count those as we'll just count those finer details. Like, it's kind of interesting because Chun-Li, a lot of the Street Fighter characters really do stop at secondary shapes. And like their tertiary details are relatively minor. With Jin, like we have this segment here that's on his pants. I can feel myself getting tired and lazy. Like, let's continue. Okay, so this here, the triangles that would comprise the triangles comprised of those pins on his gloves. Technically, it's a shape. It's a tertiary shape it's a tertiary shape with a comprised of a pattern. That's a good way to put it. This here would be a tertiary shape that we're able to make out. Pan Am. Tertiary shape, tertiary shape. Again, this secondary shape is comprised of tertiary shapes. These belts themselves would be considered tertiary shapes with sub-shapes beneath them. Or again, you see that there. And then we can kind of see something going on with the jacket, or with the jacket sleeve. I should have noted a secondary shape, but like it wasn't really that evident with the gloves, but you can kind of get the idea. Movado, we have tertiary shapes. Our tertiary shapes going here. Alright. We have tertiary shape there. And then we just have patterning there and there. And let's see, a tertiary shape there. And there. Alright, so with Human Smoke, we can kind of consider this break to be tertiary. Like this area within, that would be tertiary, with a pattern within it. The break for the knee portion of the armor. The break here. And then the rest would be considered like sub-tertiary. You see the break there. Alright. Now here's the funny thing, right? We have a diamond composed of other diamonds as far as Kitana's top goes. Tertiary shape would be considered her choker. And technically, it kind of depends on who you ask, but the trim on her, leg wear could also be considered a secondary shape. Could be. Again, it depends on who you ask. But there's also a pattern there. For patterning. Technically, these the laces here would also be considered patterning, but they do contribute to the shape of the design. So you know what? We're going to count them. We are going to count them. This may be stupid. Depends on who you ask, but we're counting them because they are an element of the design that matters. Donkey Kong stops at stops at secondary shapes pretty much. Maybe the smile could be considered a tertiary shape, but like generally that depends on that really depends on the character's mood, so we don't count it, right? We're just going by pure information. Fox McCloud. We have like some interesting tertiary shapes going on here. We have a tertiary shape going on with the gloves. Let's see. Tertiary shape going there. The eyebrows. This belt in particular with that particular triangle. Here's the funny thing, right? This strap right there, for whatever the heck it's strapping to his hip there on that side, it's basically kind of a stealth secondary shape. And like even on his boots, again we have a sub-tertiary level on these boots, but we won't concern ourselves with that. Like for example, these little cracks could be considered patterning. This guy here. There's something interesting. Alright, so like these tertiary shapes are informing the silhouette, which again, remember we said that this was a secondary shape made of tertiary shapes. Here we have a break in this secondary shape that creates a tertiary shape. I did not mark this as secondary. Ah, that's why. Okay, so this is kind of interesting because right here we see that this would be a secondary shape on this leg. It's the same pattern, same color, same value, but we see it here. And it's a tertiary shape. Why? Because alright. So like if we look at this arm in aggregate, we see the major shape, but we also see it broken by this shape here, which would make it a secondary, and broken even further into this particular portion, which would make it tertiary. Does that make sense? Then we have like the holsters, which further break that down. And that's not a change in value, that's a change in lighting. And then, alright, so we have our boy Cyrax here, and there is a lot going on. Alright, so like the easiest tertiary shapes would be his dreads. Alright, so like this section of his abs that's segmented, like full of tertiary shapes, and also some patterning here where we see where we would see like these as a pattern, we'd see these lights as a pattern. Within this dark value section here, we have a tertiary shape being formed. Well, a pair of them really. It's kind of difficult for me to make out what's going on over here, but it's the same general principle. Here we have our tertiary shape. And we have tertiary shapes here on the shins. And I hope this has been able to help you like figure out. So like things like wrinkles, etc., don't really count towards shapes within the hierarchy. Things like patterns don't really count as shapes within the hierarchy. They're kind of sort of below the hierarchy. Believe it or not, they're still important for the believability of characters, but they are not part of the hierarchy. So if we go ahead and we remove the character visual information, we can see that these characters all of a sudden become a lot more recognizable, all because of the way that their shape hierarchies are ordered. And with that, I do believe we can conclude our lecture. Holy shit, I've been lecturing for 2 hours. We can conclude our lecture on shape hierarchy. I do hope that helped. Yeah, it's initially very confusing, but as you use it more and more, and as you recognize it more and more, and as you like look at more characters and analyze why and how they work, it becomes second nature. Keep this bot up. You know what? I'm going to put this bot on my YouTube channel. Just upload it and like make it available. And I'll give you the link once I do upload it. And with that, let's just pause this. And with that, it's time to call it. Thank you very much for dropping by. I appreciate it so much. And yes, you can get a copy of this. Until next time, I want you to be careful out there. Look out for yourselves. Look out for each other. Be safe, stay sharp, and hunt well. Have a good one, and peace out. Whew. Later.